Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are back on with this old beast. So some of the old school followers of the channel will probably recognise this car. There is a couple of videos on this of us building this, and we completed the build on this car in, I think it was June last year, so June 24, if I remember correctly, is when we finished this car. And we actually did a 3-week challenge on this. So we took this car from what was basically a stripped out bare shell to how you see it now in the space of 3 weeks, which was many late nights, blood, sweat and tears, to get it to this position you see it in right now. So we are experiencing a few issues with this car, which I've just never got around to curing, which is why it's now parked away in my garage. But before we get into that, I'm going to take you for a little walk around the car for those who haven't seen it. Some of you guys are probably looking at this and wondering what the hell is this thing. It is quite modified. So I'll take you for a little walk around and we'll explain a little bit about the car. So again, we built this in June 2024 to get it down to the VBOA National Rally at Sywell Aerodrome in Northampton, which is one of the biggest Opel shows of the year. We actually managed to get the car there where it won a nice little trophy for itself. The colour is Jamaica blue, which I think suits the car really well. I wanted something a little bit different on this one. We've built many red cars and white cars and black cars and never built a blue one, always fancied one, so I thought why not, it's a highly modified car, let's go for something a little bit out there and make it stand out a little bit. So the body kit is off a Mark 1 Astra GTE, which is the wheel arches and the side skirts you'll see there. These have been fabricated and made to fit the Manta body shell. These have been bonded in and fit really nicely indeed. The wheels are just some BBS replicas, they're not genuine BBS, however they are genuine BBS on that one, so you can probably see the difference. So these are just BBS replicas. We had to fit stretch tyres on this. I'm not a big fan of the stretch tyre look, but as you can see, if we didn't do that, because we wanted to run this car quite low, there would have been a bit of contact there and it would have damaged the arches, so I was left with not really any options other than to run the stretch tyres on that one. So the body kit, Mark 1 Astra GTE. This would have actually been the passenger side rear on the Mark 1 Astra. So these are swapped corner to corner. When you take them from the Astra and put them onto a Manta, they actually fit pretty well with not a lot of modifications to make them fit the Manta body shell. It's running a standard Chicago grey Recaro interior. Pretty basic inside. We've got the white dials, got a nice little steering wheel, nice stainless steel gear knob, a couple of additional gauges, Manta Ray up on the dashboard, nice little old school temperature gauge there. It appears one of my wonderful children have been messing around in the garage and they've actually managed to pull off the Recaro badge from the seat. Do have the badge, so I'm going to have to try and figure out how that goes back on, get that back in. It's got a decent sound system in this car as well. We've got some component speakers there in the doors. We've got some nice chunky 6x9s on the back shelf. The back of the rear seats is actually got some amplifiers, some old school Alpine amplifiers mounted against the back of that. And then we also have quite a large sub in the boot, a bass tube, so large in fact that we can't actually fit the rest of the parcel shelf because it's too big. So we are going to be changing that out for a bit of a smaller one so we can get the rest of that parcel shelf put in, which I do have. We've got the Engelmann 400 style mirrors on here. Around the front is where the main differences are. So again, this is an Opel Manta GT hatchback and it's fitted with an Ascona front end, so we actually call this a Mancona. So it's got the Ascona front wings, Ascona front panel, slam panel, grille, headlights, bonnet is all off an Opel Ascona. I think it gives the car a really mean look. This splitter was actually a genuine Ermshire Ascona B front splitter, which we've again made, suit and bonded into the car to make it all look like a one-piece seamless kit. We've got a nice big bonnet bulge there off a 3-litre Ford Capri. We had to fit that basically, so we had some clearance for these quad Delorto carbs. Now the next thing you're probably going to be asking is, what the hell is that's in the car? So this is a TVR V8, basically based on a Rover V8 as all the TVR engines was, but highly tuned compared to a Rover V8. So this engine has actually been pretty much race built. It's all lightened balance, it's got a lightened crank, balance crank, repolished. It's got the big valve heads, big cams, as you can see, the big Dell'Auto carbs. It's got a semi-dry sump. Many other modifications going on with that car. We had this mapped up at Motorscope in Northallerton. We was on a quite tight time frame again because this was a 3-week build. The aim of the game when we took it up to Motorscope was just to get this car running, because it run really rough originally because all the carbs was out of sync, all the jetting was wrong. So the guys up at Motorscope did an absolutely fantastic job of tuning this car and making it run absolutely perfect. We wasn't after any power at that point. We just literally wanted to make the car run well enough to drive it from Manchester to the car show down at Northampton. They actually managed to squeeze 310 horsepower out of this engine without even trying for the power. So there is probably more power to be had out of this engine, but 310 horsepower in a car of this size with this weight, it goes really well. It puts the power down very well indeed. And this is probably one of the quickest Mantas I've ever driven. And we have had a lot of fast Mantas over the years. So that is pretty much you guys up to speed on the car. I'll just take you for a little look around the back. There's a couple of little changes I'm going to make around the back as well. So it's actually running an exclusive style rear bumper on this with the infill panel. We've blacked out the rear lights, and I must say I'm not actually a big fan of that. I think I might go back to the standard rear lights. Just looks a little bit boy racery for me. It was just something we had in our head when we built it, going with the black and blue theme. So probably going to change them backlights out. So let's go back to the engine and let's discuss some of the issues we've been facing. So on the run down to Northampton, the car was suffering with some coolant loss. Now what it's doing is basically the header tank is overfilling with coolant. As you can see there now, the coolant is right at the bottom. So if I was to take this car on a nice steady drive, it'll run absolutely perfect and it won't lose any coolant. As soon as you go for a lengthy drive and start giving this car some beans, as we call it, the coolant bottle, header tank, expansion tank, whatever you want to call it, actually fills up to the point where it's got nowhere else to go, and then it starts to spew out the top of the cap. Now I've done various tests on this. We've kind of ruled out a head gasket issue. The engine has been fully rebuilt. It was some years ago, but the car hasn't really been used since the engine rebuild, and the engine has always been in dry storage. So I would like to think that everything inside there is still pretty good. Obviously we changed all the fluids and whatnot before we got it running. But the symptoms of a failed head gasket or a cracked head just aren't there, in my opinion. The car doesn't overheat when it loses the coolant. The temperature gauge stays fine. It doesn't mix any oil and water. The heaters always blow hot, and I've actually also done a sniff test when the car is warm. We've sucked up some of the gases out of that header tank into the sniff tester. It doesn't change colour, so there is no exhaust gases in that coolant. Now, what we think the issue is, or could be, originally the car was actually airlocking in the top of the thermostat housing. Now you'll see there that thermostat housing is quite high, especially compared to the height of the radiator and the height of the water level in the expansion tank. So the cure I tried to do originally was fit this leak off pipe, so any air what was trying to get trapped in the top of this thermostat housing had somewhere to go. We could get a flow of water out the top of the thermostat housing, makes its way back in to the return pipe, back into the header tank. That did make the issue much better, and I actually thought that had cured it. However, I did take it for quite a lengthy drive thinking that that was fixed, and after about 45 minutes worth of driving, it was doing it again and it was leaking coolant out of the bottle. So clearly that didn't cure the issue. So we're not entirely sure if this is a plumbing issue. We don't know whether it's this return line that is too thin and there's just too much water getting sent back than the car can physically handle, which is causing it to back up a little bit, creating a bit of pressure and obviously causing that fault. That's one theory. And the strange thing is, even when this bottle fills right up to the top and the car's still hot, you can take that cap off and there's no pressure there. There's no massive build-up of pressure. You get a little bit of a hiss, a little bit of a pop when you take the cap off. Nothing crazy. It doesn't spray water out like a fountain or anything like that. And as soon as you take that cap off, the coolant level drops back down to where it should be. So there's something really odd going on. Now, at this point, what I intend to do is remove the expansion tank, remove this return line, and basically take the radiator out and I've ordered a Nissan 200 SX aluminium radiator, which has the filler cap directly on top of the radiator, very similar to what you'll see on the Opel Mantas. So these cars don't have an expansion tank. That's the screen wash tank, obviously brake fluid. There is no expansion tank in this engine bay. It's a direct fill into the top of the radiator. So it's that kind of radiator, obviously larger to suit a bigger engine. So that is the aim of the game. We're going to start to strip out all of this lot, take out the radiator, and then once our new radiator arrives, which I've already ordered, should be here in the next couple of days, we can then get that bolted in. We're going to have to make some new mounts, fabricate some mounts up to make that radiator fit, possibly chop off the old mounts from this radiator, and again it'll also tidy the engine bay up and get rid of all this garbage in there. So that is the aim of the game, guys. Let's get cracking. First thing we're going to do is drain this coolant out and start to pull the radiator, and then work our way back to the expansion tank. So let's do it. Right, so that is the top and bottom hoses off. The next thing we've got to do is get these bolts out of here. They are quite tricky to get to. In the back there's some Allen key headed bolts. These are quite simple to get to, but it's a bit of a pig trying to get a socket or a spanner in there because they are quite close to the front panel. And then we've got one in there as well. So once we've released those, there's a fixing bolt on the bottom as well. We've got to take this breather hose off, which runs up to our catch can, and then hopefully we can pull this out. I have had this radiator out before when we painted the engine bay, and it is quite tight to say the least. So it's going to be a little bit of a fight to get this out, but we will get it out. Right, so that is the radiator out, which is now placed over there. A nice big hole there now. I'm hoping there's enough room there to get in and modify the brackets ready to accept our new aluminium radiator. It is a lot thicker core than that one as well, so it should hold a bit more coolant and allow again for better cooling. So the next step is we're going to be removing this leak off pipe that I installed, and then we're going to take off this return line and then move our way into the header tank. Right, so that is the return pipe and the expansion tank now removed. Last thing we've got to do is pull this hose out, which runs through the valley, comes all the way around here, and then it did drop down into the bottom hose, and that is the main feed from the expansion tank back into the car. I mean, the plumbing on this car was just all over the place, and basically because we was on such a short deadline, we just had to work with what we had. That was the way the car was plumbed originally, so we just assumed it'd work. But looking at this now, taking it off, the way this thing is piped up, I mean, it's no wonder it's been struggling a little bit, because there's just pipes and Jubilee clips all over the place. So this is definitely worth doing. Perhaps there could have been a way of doing this differently with the existing stuff what was on there, but I think for a permanent proper fix, fitting this new radiator with the direct fill is definitely the way to go after looking at the way this thing's been piped up. So let's pull this one out. That is the last pipe to come out. So there we go. That was actually quite easy to remove, quite a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought that radiator was going to be a bit of a pig to get out because it was really, really tight, but it didn't put up much of a fight this time, fortunately for me. So now we're just waiting for our new radiator to come. Once that comes, we can mock it up, we can sort of put it in place, mark up some positions and work out how and where we're going to fix some mounting brackets. I am going to try and either drill and riv nut these brackets on, monobolts or something along those lines, because I don't really want to be welding on this car for obvious reasons with the engine in and obviously the fresh paint and everything. So I'm going to have to try and fabricate some brackets that I can bolt on to suit this new radiator. One other thing that I did forget about, which I just reminded myself when I actually got in the car, is that the ball bearing in the bottom of this gear selector stick is quite worn. You can see it's got quite a lot of play in that before it selects a gear. So there you got your first, second, third, fourth and fifth. But if you look at that play, what's in that, it's really sloppy. So that's another thing we're going to come back to. So I'm going to get online. This has actually got an LT77 gearbox in it from the Rover Vitesse So hopefully that part should be quite easy to source and find. So I'm going to jump myself online very shortly, try and find one of these bearings. I think this is pretty much accessible by just removing the centre console, and obviously the gear gator. Should be able to get that out, extract that bearing out and pop the new one in without the need to drop the box. So that's what I'm hoping for anyway. So there's that to do. We are going to be coming back to the sound system in this car as well, tidying some of the wiring up, getting rid of this huge bass tube in the boot and fitting the rest of the parcel shelf. Couple of other little bits and bobs I'm going to be doing with this car as well. Nothing too crazy. It is pretty much 99% done now, this car. I'm hoping to get a little bit of use out of this in the summer once these faults have been rectified, and then potentially this car will probably be sold on, because as you can see guys, we're getting pretty packed up with vehicles and projects now. This is actually my private garage at home. This is a car that I built a long time ago, so that's probably going to stay, but there is various other cars. You've seen the other videos in the other workshops with the amount of stuff we've got knocking around, and there is other stuff in the background as well that you guys have not seen yet. So we do need to move some of this on. As much as I'd like to keep it all, it's just impossible. We haven't got the room and we haven't got an endless pit of money, so some of this stuff does have to go. So with that said guys, I'm going to leave this one here. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, drop us some comments, let us know what you think, and we'll see you all on the next video.